Commander Marcus Webb sat in the control room of Earth Command, watching the screens that tracked satellites and space stations orbiting the planet. It was 3 in the morning, and the world below was sleeping. Marcus had been awake for 20 hours, running drills and checking systems. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and the tired eyes of someone who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. The first sign that something was wrong came from Dr. Lisa Chun at the communications station. Her fingers stopped moving across the keyboard. She stared at her screen with her mouth slightly open. "Sir," she said quietly, "we are receiving a message. It is coming from outside our solar system." Marcus walked over to her station. The other officers in the room turned to look. Nobody spoke. Humanity had been monitoring space for decades, but they had never received a message from beyond their own system. The message began to decode on the screen. "Play it," Marcus said. The speakers crackled. A voice emerged, cold and mechanical, speaking perfect English. "The Galactic Empire does not require communication with primitive species. We have studied your world. Your resources are valuable. Your population is manageable. As of this moment, Earth is declared a subject world of the Galactic Empire. All human beings are now classified as labor units. In 21 days, our collection fleet will arrive at your primary coordinates to begin extraction operations. Any resistance will result in complete planetary destruction. Surrender is your only option for survival." The message repeated. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He was a soldier, trained to stay calm under pressure. But this was different. This was not a threat from another nation or a terrorist group. This was a threat from beyond the stars. "Is this real?" asked Colonel Raymond Price, standing next to Marcus. His voice sounded strange, like it was coming from very far away. "The signal is coming from a vessel approximately 4 light days from Earth," Dr. Chun said, her voice shaking slightly. "It is not radio noise. It is a directed transmission. Multiple redundancy checks confirmed the data integrity." Marcus made a decision. "Contact the President. Contact the General Assembly. Contact every world leader who needs to know. And send this recording to all government agencies. Now." The next 6 hours were chaos. Marcus watched as governments around the world woke to the message. News channels broadcast it within minutes. People in cities and towns across Earth learned that they were no longer free. Humanity had been declared slaves by an empire they did not even know existed by dawn. Every military command center in the world was active. Emergency meetings were called. Scientists analyzed the transmission. Military strategists studied the message. Politicians argued about what to do. The United Nations held an emergency session. Marcus was called to brief the President and the Security Council. He flew to Washington and entered a secure bunker beneath the White House. The President was a woman named Helen Garrett, 63 years old, with sharp eyes and a steady voice. "Commander," she said, "tell me what we know." Marcus laid out the facts. "The message comes from a vessel that is still 4 light days away. That means the actual signal was sent 4 days ago. We have approximately 17 days before any ship arrives at Earth. The transmission came from a single vessel, so we do not yet know the size or composition of the fleet that will arrive. Is there any way to reach them?" asked General Morrison, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. "Any way to negotiate?" "We could send a message," Marcus said. "But any communication we send will take 4 days to reach them. By that time, more ships will have launched." The President nodded slowly. "What do they want?" "Labor units," Marcus said. "They want our people. They want to enslave us." The silence in the room was heavy and absolute. Dr. Robert Kim, the science advisor, spoke up. "If they have the technology to reach us from 4 light days away, their weapons technology must be far beyond anything we possess. Resistance would be futile. Surrender is not an option, said General Morrison. His voice was hard as steel. The president looked at Marcus. Commander, if we cannot negotiate and we cannot win a military conflict, what do you recommend? Marcus had been thinking about this question since he first heard the transmission. He knew what he wanted to say. He knew what the military wanted to do. He also knew that most of the room wanted to believe they had no choice. We fight, he said. We fight not because we can win through conventional means. We fight because we are human. We fight because surrender means the end of human freedom. We fight because our children will grow up as slaves if we do not. General Morrison nodded. The president leaned back in her chair. How long would you need to prepare? She asked. 21 days is not enough time to build weapons that can match their technology, Marcus said. But it is enough time to develop strategies they will not expect. It is enough time to bring nations together. It is enough time to prepare people to fight. Over the next 3 days, the president convened a secret war council. Military leaders from every nation that had weapons and space capability were brought in. Marcus worked with Colonel Kevin Hayes, a tactical expert from the Air Force, and Dr. Amanda Foster, a physicist from the National Space Administration. They studied the message again and again, looking for any weakness in the Empire's armor. The public announcement came on the 4th day. The president addressed the world from the United Nations. She told them the truth. She told them that Earth faced an invasion. She told them that the world was united in its response. She told them that humanity would not become slaves. On the streets of cities around the world, people responded with a mixture of fear and anger. But there was also something else. There was a sense of unity. For the first time in modern history, every nation understood that they faced a common enemy. Every person understood that they were fighting for something that mattered. Marcus returned to Earth Command. He began to work with his team on a plan that most people would have called impossible. They had less than 3 weeks to prepare. They had inferior technology. They had no training for space warfare of this magnitude. But they had something else. They had desperation. They had courage. They had the knowledge that slavery or freedom was the only choice. Marcus stood in the control room and looked at the screens, showing the approach vector of the incoming fleet. He made a private prayer, though he was not a religious man. Then he turned to his officers. Begin Operation Freedom, he said. We have 17 days. Make every moment count. The people of Earth began to prepare for war. Colonel Kevin Hayes studied the maps of space around Earth. He had been a military strategist for 27 years, and he had never faced an enemy like this. The alien fleet would arrive in sections. The first wave would have 50 ships. The second wave, scheduled to arrive 3 days later, would have another 100. By the time the third wave arrived, the Galactic Empire would have enough power to crush any human resistance. But Kevin understood something that many did not. An enemy that expects an easy victory often makes critical mistakes. He was meeting with Commander Marcus Webb and Dr. Amanda Foster in a secure facility beneath the Rocky Mountains. The room was filled with screens and computers. Maps of Earth's orbit surrounded them. Their ships are strong, Kevin said, moving his hand across the holographic display. But they are built for conquest of weak worlds. They are built for dominance, not defense. They have never faced an enemy that fights back. Dr. Amanda Foster nodded. She was a thin woman with sharp features and intelligent eyes. Her expertise was in physics and propulsion systems. I have been studying the engine signatures from the message transmission. The Empire uses a standard hyperspace drive system. It is efficient, but it requires certain calibrations based on local stellar geometry. What does that mean in military terms? Marcus asked. It means they cannot simply jump between random coordinates, Amanda said. They must follow prepared routes. Those routes are in their navigation systems. If we could disrupt those systems, we could create chaos in their fleet movements. Kevin leaned forward. Can you penetrate their encryption? Amanda smiled slightly. I cannot, but I have colleagues who might be able to. We have scientists from 17 nations working on this problem. Someone will find a way. Marcus turned to Kevin. Tell me about your strategy. Kevin pulled up new images on the screens. We cannot win a head-to-head battle. Our ships are too weak. Our weapons are too small. But the Empire has a critical weakness. They expect us to fight according to normal rules of warfare. They expect linear tactics and clear battle formations. He pointed to various locations in Earth's orbit. We have mining colonies on the moon and in the asteroid belt. We have solar arrays and space stations. Most of these are not military installations, but they can be weaponized. We can turn the entire space around Earth into a battlefield that uses their own strengths against them. Give me specifics, Marcus said. Kevin began to explain his plan. The first strike force would use solar radiation collectors to focus the sun's energy into directed beams. These would target the Empire's command vessel as it approached. The second force would use tractor beam technology, currently under development, to push asteroids into collision courses with enemy ships. The third force would be a direct assault using every available spacecraft Earth could equip with weapons. This is a suicide mission, Amanda said. Whoever pilots those ships will not return. I know, Kevin said. But the pilots understand. They are volunteers. They know the price of failure. Marcus listened carefully. He had known soldiers his entire life. He understood the kind of courage Kevin was describing. These would be pilots who accepted that their missions were likely to be fatal. They would fly toward an enemy fleet, knowing they would probably not survive the encounter. How many ships can we field? Marcus asked. 300 combat-capable spacecraft, Kevin said, plus another 200 support vessels. It is less than a fraction of what the Empire will send, but we will have the advantage of defending our own territory. The Empire will be far from their supply lines. Over the next week, the plan was refined. Nations contributed their best pilots, scientists, and engineers. The United States provided advanced fighter jets that were quickly modified for space combat. Russia contributed ballistic missiles that could be adapted for spacecraft. China provided sensor technology. Japan contributed advanced robotics. Every nation on Earth that had capability sent their best technology. Pilots began to volunteer for what everyone understood was a likely suicide mission. Captain Nicole Turner, an American pilot with 15 years of experience, was selected to lead the first fighter squadron. She knew the odds. She volunteered anyway. My daughter is 7 years old, Nicole told Marcus during a briefing. I will not let her grow up as a slave. If flying this mission means she gets to be free, then I will fly it. The training was intense and compressed into days. Pilots trained in simulators that have been hastily reprogrammed to mimic the physics of space combat. Weapons technicians worked around the clock to install new systems on old ships. Scientists raced to understand the captured signal data. Then, on day 14, Amanda Foster made a breakthrough. Her team, working with computer experts from around the world, had cracked the first layer of the Empire's encryption. Inside the code was something unexpected. It was a star map. They left it open deliberately, Amanda told Marcus, her voice filled with a kind of stunned excitement. It is almost like they wanted us to find it. But this map shows their entire navigation network. It shows every jump point. It shows every coordinate they use to move through space. Marcus understood immediately. We can predict their movements. More than that, Amanda said. We can predict their arrival points. We can prepare ambushes at every location they might emerge. We can destroy them before they even reach full strength. Kevin Hayes refined his strategy with this new information. The fight would not be a single battle. It would be a series of coordinated strikes across multiple locations in Earth orbit. When the first enemy ships appeared, they would emerge into a nightmare. Asteroid fragments would already be positioned along their likely approach vectors. Solar radiation beams would be charged and ready. Fighter squadrons would be waiting. It would not be an easy victory, but it would be a fight. 2 days before the enemy arrival, Marcus addressed all the pilots and soldiers who were about to engage the Galactic Empire. He stood before hundreds of people, in uniform and in civilian clothes, united by a single purpose. In 2 days, Marcus said, we will face an enemy that has conquered hundreds of worlds. An enemy that believes humans are too weak to resist. An enemy that expects us to surrender without a fight. He paused, looking at the faces before him. Nicole Turner was there, in her flight suit. Kevin Hayes stood with his tactical team. Amanda Foster was present with her scientific staff. And there were hundreds of others, all waiting to hear what their commander would say. We are going to show them what it means to fight, Marcus said. We are going to show them that humans do not surrender. We are going to show them that the will to be free is more powerful than any weapon they possess. And even if some of us do not survive this battle, humanity will never forget what we did here. Your children will tell your story. The galaxy will know that Earth was not conquered easily. Marcus raised his hand. We fight for freedom. We fight for each other. We fight for humanity. The people in the room understood. They were about to change the course of history. They were about to prove that humans could not be enslaved. The countdown began. 14 hours remained until first contact. The scanners showed the enemy ships emerging from hyperspace, exactly where the computers had predicted. 12 massive vessels appeared like ghosts materializing in the darkness, followed by dozens of smaller attack craft. The Galactic Empire had arrived at Earth. Captain Nicole Turner sat in the cockpit of her fighter, watching the enemy fleet take shape on her display screen. Her hands were steady on the controls. Her heart was beating fast, but her mind was clear. She had trained for this her entire career, and now the moment had arrived. All units, this is Eagle Lead, Nicole said into her communication system. Go hot, weapons armed. Let's show these bastards what happens when they try to enslave humanity. Around Earth, the trap was springing shut. The solar radiation arrays, positioned on orbital platforms and moon colonies, began to focus their beams. Concentrated light brighter than 1,000 suns was channeled through advanced lenses. The first enemy destroyer was caught in the beam. Its hull began to glow. The shielding held, but it also meant the ship was forced to divert all its power to defense. It could not attack. Commander Marcus Webb watched from Earth Command as the first phase unfolded. He was sitting in a command center filled with dozens of screens, each one showing different aspects of the battle. Everything was happening exactly as Kevin Hayes had predicted. Asteroid bombardment commencing, reported an officer. Kevin Hayes had positioned hundreds of asteroids in carefully calculated orbits. Now, using small thruster packs that had been attached to the rocks, they were pushed into the path of the incoming enemy ships. The asteroids were moving at incredible speed. An enemy cruiser tried to dodge, but there was nowhere to go. The asteroid struck the ship's shield generator. The impact was catastrophic. The generator failed. The asteroid shattered through the ship's hull. The cruiser exploded in a burst of light. The first alien ship to invade human space had been destroyed, but the Empire was not unprepared for conflict. Their remaining ships began returning fire. Energy weapons lit up the darkness, striking at the asteroid fragments and sensor arrays. Several of humanity's defensive positions were destroyed. But for every human installation that fell, the enemy lost more ships. First fighter squadron engaging, Nicole reported. Her fighter burst out from behind a lunar station. accelerating at maximum velocity toward the nearest enemy ship. Neko's fighter was a modified military jet, jury-rigged with weapon systems that had been designed for ground-to-air combat. It was not ideal for space warfare, but in Nicole's hands it was deadly. She fired a missile. The projectile streaked across space and struck the enemy ship's shield. The shield held, but Nicole was already maneuvering for another run. Her squadron followed her, 12 fighters moving in perfect formation, a deadly dance against the massive enemy vessels. Another asteroid field was pushed directly into the path of an enemy battleship. The impact was devastating. The ship was damaged, its systems overloaded, its ability to fight severely compromised. The Galactic Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds without losing a single vessel to planetary defense. They had never faced an enemy that fought with such ferocity and creativity. Their ships were stronger and more advanced, but they were also more rigid in their tactics. They expected enemies to surrender or die. They did not expect humanity to use the terrain itself as a weapon. An enemy captain, commanding one of the massive destroyers, tried to report the situation to his superiors. But the communications relay stations had already been destroyed. He was alone, facing an enemy that kept hitting him from unexpected directions. His shields were weakening. His crew was reporting damage across multiple decks. For the first time in his 1,000-year-long life, he understood fear. Captain Turner's fighter group was running low on weapons. Nicole had fired 7 missiles and counted 9 direct hits. But the enemy was adapting. They were predicting her attacks and moving their ships to compensate. Nicole knew that her time was running out. She made a decision that would later be remembered in human history. Instead of retreating to reload, she turned her fighter directly toward the enemy battleship. Her screen showed the massive vessel before her, its weapons charging to fire on her fragile craft. "This is Eagle 1, Nicole said into her communication system. "I am executing final run. This is not a retreat. This is an attack." Her fighter accelerated directly at the battleship. The enemy weapons fired. One of her engines was hit. Alarms screamed in her cockpit. But Nicole did not change course. She was coming in hot and fast. Her remaining missiles fired, all of them at once, directly into the heart of the enemy vessel. The impacts were devastating. The ship's power systems were overwhelmed. The reactor began to fail. Nicole ejected at the last moment. Her escape pod launched away from her fighter as the aircraft impacted the enemy ship and exploded. The explosion triggered a cascade of failures inside the battleship. The reactor went critical. The ship began to tear itself apart. The second massive enemy vessel had been destroyed. By now, the remaining ships in the first wave understood that they were facing a real war, not an easy conquest. The human defenses had been more formidable than their reports had indicated. They were suffering losses. They were losing the tactical advantage. Colonel Kevin Hayes was watching everything from Earth Command. He was already calling for the second phase of the attack. More asteroids were being pushed into intercept courses. More laser arrays were being directed at new targets. The human forces had already taken heavy losses, but they were winning. An enemy transport ship tried to break through the asteroid field and head for Earth's surface. It was one of the extraction vessels, designed to carry enslaved humans back to the Empire. Kevin saw it moving toward the planet. "Intercept that ship," he commanded. 3 fighter pilots, volunteers who understood they were on suicide missions, turned their aircraft toward the transport. They fired everything they had. The transport was damaged but continued its descent. One pilot rammed his fighter directly into the transport's engines. The impact was violent and final. Both the fighter and the transport were destroyed. By the end of the first day of combat, the Galactic Empire had lost 8 of their first wave destroyers and several smaller vessels. The human losses were also heavy. 43 fighter pilots had been killed. Dozens of orbital stations had been destroyed. But Earth was still standing. More importantly, the impossible had happened. Humans had hurt the Galactic Empire. Humans had proven that they could fight. The remaining enemy ships withdrew to a safe distance, regrouping and reassessing their strategy. The Empire's commanders were consulting with their superiors, reporting what had happened. The humans had not surrendered. The humans had fought back with a ferocity and ingenuity that was unexpected. Marcus Webb stood in the control room, watching the enemy fleet pull back. He understood that this was only the beginning. More ships would come. The Empire would send overwhelming force. But for the first time since receiving that terrible message, Marcus felt something other than despair. He felt hope. Outside Earth Command, the night sky was lit by the fires of battle. The people of Earth looked up and saw the explosions of alien warships being destroyed. They understood that they were not victims. They were fighters. The war had just begun. Dr. Amanda Foster had not slept in 36 hours. She was sitting in front of a quantum computer in a secure facility, staring at line after line of alien code. Her team of 12 scientists from around the world was working alongside her. Each one focused on breaking the next layer of the Galactic Empire's encryption. The first layer had been cracked, giving them the star map. But the real treasure was deeper inside the code. The real treasure was the complete navigation system of the entire empire. "We have something," said Dr. James Park, a cryptographer from South Korea. His fingers were moving rapidly across his keyboard. "This section is different. It is not encrypted with the same algorithm. It is older code." Amanda leaned over his shoulder. She saw what he was seeing. There, embedded in the newer encryption, was an older layer. The Empire's newest navigation system had been built on top of older technology, and that older technology had its vulnerabilities. "Start working on this angle," Amanda commanded, while Amanda and her team worked on the encryption. Colonel Kevin Hayes was planning the next phase of the assault. The Empire had sent its second wave of reinforcements. 97 ships were approaching Earth in coordinated strike patterns. Kevin studied the data on their approach vectors and predicted where they would emerge from hyperspace. His plan was different this time. Instead of concentrating all their forces around Earth, Kevin was going to take the war to the enemy. He was going to attack their supply lines. He was going to strike at their relay stations. He was going to make the journey to Earth so costly that the Empire would reconsider the entire operation. "We have 4 cargo freighters that can be converted to weapons carriers," Kevin told Marcus in a briefing. "We can load them with explosives and send them toward the Empire's supply route. When enemy ships get close enough, we detonate them. These are large payloads. The damage will be significant." "How many pilots do we lose?" Marcus asked. "All of them," Kevin said simply. "The ships will be unmanned. Automated flight systems will guide them. No human casualties." Marcus nodded. It was a small mercy in a brutal war. 3 days later, the first supply relief convoy from the Empire was intercepted by human forces. The convoy consisted of 5 transport ships carrying ammunition, fuel, and replacement parts for the damaged warships. The automated cargo ships hit 2 of the transports directly, destroying them instantly. The other 3 transports were damaged and unable to continue their journey. The Galactic Empire was bleeding. Their supply lines were being cut. Their ships could not be repaired as quickly as they were being damaged. For the first time in their long history, the Empire was losing a war of attrition. Then Amanda Foster made the breakthrough. "We are in," she said, looking up from her screen. Her face was pale with exhaustion and excitement. "We have access to the navigation system. We have the complete route structure for the entire Galactic Empire's fleet movements." Marcus was stunned. With the navigation routes, They could predict not just where the next enemy ships would emerge, but where all future Empire reinforcements would come from. They could see the entire strategic picture. "Can you shut it down?" Kevin asked. Amanda shook her head. "If we shut it down, they will know we have cracked their system. But if we leave it open, we can use it. We can see every ship that is being sent toward Earth. We can see the timing of each arrival. We can prepare for everything." Kevin took that information and created something beautiful in its brutality. He planned a series of ambushes across multiple star systems. When enemy reinforcements left their bases, they would emerge from hyperspace to find human forces waiting. Ships that had never seen combat, ships that had conquered dozens of worlds without resistance, would find themselves facing an enemy that knew exactly when and where they would. Arrived at the second wave of enemy ships was intercepted before they even reached Earth. The first wave of 63 vessels was met by human fighter squadrons and automated weapons, platforms positioned across 1,000 kilometers of space. The battle lasted only 4 hours. By the end of it, the entire second wave had been destroyed. Not a single enemy ship reached Earth's orbital space. The Galactic Empire was shocked. They had lost over 100 ships. They had lost their supply lines. They had lost the element of surprise. And they had lost something more valuable than ships or soldiers. They had lost the belief in their own invincibility. News of the human victories spread throughout the galaxy. On distant worlds, enslaved populations heard what was happening at Earth. They heard that a species had declared war on the Galactic Empire and was actually winning. They heard that the all-powerful Empire could bleed. On the world of Kepler 442b, a mining colony of 8,000 enslaved humans rose up against their imperial masters. On Proxima Centauri, an alien species that had been conquered 300 years earlier launched an armed rebellion. On a dozen other worlds, oppressed populations began to question the Empire's dominion. If Earth could fight back successfully, why could they not do the same? The Galactic Empire's government was in chaos. Officials were arguing about what to do. Some wanted to send even larger fleets. Others wanted to retreat and abandon the invasion. The Council of Species that governed. The Empire was fracturing as member worlds began to question whether they wanted to continue supporting a war they were losing. Marcus Webb received a communication from an alien species called the Kelver, a peaceful race that had been conquered by the Empire 2 centuries earlier. They offered to provide intelligence information on the Empire's fleet movements, communication systems, and defensive strategies. Then came communications from 5 other species. All of them offered to help. All of them wanted to fight alongside humanity against the Galactic Empire. The invasion of Earth had triggered something that the Empire had never expected. It had triggered a galactic rebellion. Colonel Kevin Hayes looked at the new data flowing in from allied species. "We can win this," he said to Marcus. "We can actually win this war." Marcus was sitting in the command center, watching as the face of galactic politics changed in real time. The Empire was still powerful. They still had more ships and more weapons. But they had lost something crucial. They had lost the moment. They had lost the advantage. They had lost the ability to intimidate worlds into submission. "Send a message to the Empire's government," Marcus said. "Tell them that Earth has allied with multiple species. Tell them that their dominion is over. Tell them that we are offering them one chance. Stop the invasion. Recognize Earth's independence. Release all enslaved populations. Or face the combined military force of every species that has ever been oppressed by the Galactic Empire." The message was sent. 4 days later, the Galactic Empire's High Council voted to cease all military operations and begin negotiations with the allied species. They had no choice. The war they had started with the intention of conquering a single primitive world had become something much larger. It had become the beginning of the end of the Galactic Empire's reign of dominance. Marcus Webb watched the news reports from across the galaxy. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were declaring their independence. The Galactic Empire was no longer sending fleets to conquer worlds. The Galactic Empire was fighting for survival. 20 years had passed since the day the Galactic Empire declared humanity slaves. Marcus Webb sat in his office at the United Nations Space Headquarters, looking at photographs from the early days of the war. There was a picture of Nicole Turner in her flight suit, taken just hours before her suicide run against the enemy battleship. There was an image of Kevin Hayes studying star maps with determination etched into every line of his face. There was a photo of Amanda Foster at the moment she cracked the Empire's encryption system, her hand raised in triumph. They were all still alive. That was one of the miracles of what had happened. The war had ended not with a bang, but with a treaty. The Treaty of Earth, signed by representatives of the Galactic Empire, the newly independent human civilization, and the 7 species that had joined the rebellion, established new rules for galactic conduct. No species could enslave another. All worlds had the right to self-determination. The Galactic Empire was dissolved, replaced by a galactic council where all species had equal representation. Marcus was now 73 years old. He had stepped back from military command 5 years ago, but he still consulted on matters of galactic security. He often thought about the price that humanity had paid for its freedom. Nearly 10,000 humans had died in the war. Thousands more had been injured. Entire orbital stations had been destroyed. Resources that could have been used for exploration and development had been consumed by the military effort. The scars of the conflict were still visible across Earth's infrastructure, but there was something more important than what had been lost. There was what had been gained. Marcus looked at a report on his desk. It showed the current state of human civilization. Humans now had colonies on 17 worlds throughout the galaxy. Human scientists were leading research efforts in quantum propulsion and biological engineering. Human diplomats were mediating disputes between different species. Humanity had gone from being a species that didn't even know the galaxy existed to being recognized. Power in galactic affairs. The door to Marcus's office opened. Amanda Foster walked in, carrying a data crystal. She was now 71 years old, but her mind was as sharp as it had been during the war. The research from the Calver collaboration is complete, Amanda said, handing him the crystal. We have successfully integrated their biological computing systems with our technological infrastructure. The applications are extraordinary. Marcus smiled. This was the real victory. This was what the war had made possible. Cooperation between species. The sharing of knowledge. The mutual benefit that came from working together instead of trying to dominate each other. That night, Marcus attended a ceremony at the memorial for the fallen. The names of everyone who had died in the war were inscribed on the walls. 10,000 names. Some were soldiers. Some were civilians. All of them had been necessary sacrifices to preserve human freedom. Nicole Turner was there, now in civilian clothes, retired from military service. She had become an educator, teaching young pilots about the history of the war and the principles that had guided humanity's fight for freedom. I brought my grandson, Nicole said, gesturing to a boy of about 9 years old. He looked up at the memorial wall, reading the names with the kind of serious attention that only a child could bring to the weight of history. What did you tell him? Marcus asked. I told him that his great-grandmother fought to protect his freedom, Nicole said. I told him that sometimes people have to be willing to die for something that matters. I told him that because humans were brave enough to say no to slavery, billions of people across the galaxy are now free to choose their own futures. The boy turned from the wall. "Did you really fly a spaceship into an alien battleship?" he asked Nicole, his eyes wide with excitement. Nicole knelt down to his level. "I did. And I would do it again, because that is what my species needed me to do." In cities across Earth, celebrations were being held for what was now called Freedom Day, the anniversary of the first battle against the Galactic Empire. In New York, in Tokyo, in Lagos, in Mumbai, people gathered to remember the war and to honor what it had made possible. The youth of Earth looked at the stars with different eyes now. The stars were not distant and unattainable. The stars were home. Humans were exploring them. Humans were building there. Humans were being treated as equals by other intelligent species on a world called Threshold. A colony of 3,000 humans was building a university with scientists from 6 different species. The university would research the fundamental nature of the universe and the principles that governed the interaction between civilizations. It would be a symbol of what had become possible when species chose to work together instead of trying to dominate each other. Kevin Hayes was in charge of the security for the university. Even at 75 years old, he was still thinking about strategy and defense. But now his strategy was focused on preventing future conflicts instead of fighting them. "The key to peace," Kevin said during a speech at the university's opening, "is understanding that every species, every civilization, has the right to exist and to flourish. When the Galactic Empire tried to deny that right to humans, we fought back. And in fighting back, we gave the galaxy permission to do the same. We showed that no single power can dominate forever. We showed that a civilization that believes in freedom is stronger than a civilization built on slavery." Years passed. The generation that had fought the war began to age. Marcus Webb died at the age of 87, knowing that the future of humanity was secure. Nicole Turner wrote a memoir that became a bestseller throughout the galaxy. Amanda Foster was awarded the prize for universal achievement for her work in helping multiple species collaborate on scientific problems. But the most important legacy was not in individuals or accomplishments. The most important legacy was in the creation of a new galactic age. For 300 years before humanity's arrival, the Galactic Empire had ruled through fear and dominance. Entire species had been bred for slavery. Worlds had been stripped of resources. Civilizations had been forced to conform to the Empire's standards or be destroyed. It had been an age of darkness and oppression. The war that Earth started had ended that age. The rebellion that humanity inspired had spread across 1,000 systems. The belief in the right to dominate had been replaced with the principle of equality between species. A galactic council now governed through consensus, not through force. Species that had been enemies were now allies. Worlds that had been oppressed were now free. 100 years after the war ended, a human historian named Dr. Susan Martinez was giving a lecture at the Threshold University. She was speaking to students from 12 different species about the historical significance of the Earth conflict. "What is remarkable about humanity's resistance," Susan said, "is not that humans won a military victory. What is remarkable is that humans understood something profound about the nature of freedom. Humans understood that freedom is not a luxury. Freedom is not something that can be taken away as long as people are willing to fight for it." That understanding spread through the galaxy and changed everything. A student from the Kelver species raised her hand. "Do you think humanity would have resisted if the Empire had been kinder in their demands? If they had asked for resources instead of enslaving people?" Susan considered the question carefully. "I think that humans would have resisted anyway, because humans have a fundamental belief that they have the right to determine their own future. The Empire made that clear when they declared humans slaves. They were not asking for cooperation. They were demanding submission. And humans, when given the choice between submission and resistance, will choose resistance every time. Outside the classroom, humans and aliens walked across the campus together. They studied together. They worked together. They built together. The future that they were creating together was one where no single species dominated. No single civilization ruled. All species had value. All voices were heard in the night sky above the threshold campus. Planets hung like jewels. Humans could see Earth if they looked in the right direction, that small blue world that had sparked the galactic revolution. And looking at that planet, all the inhabitants of the Galactic Council understood something that the old Empire had never learned. The smallest spark of resistance, when combined with courage and determination, can change the entire galaxy. One species that refuses to be enslaved can inspire billions of others to throw off their chains. One generation willing to sacrifice everything can create a future of freedom for generations to come. Humanity had declared that it would not be slaves. And in that declaration, the galaxy had found its voice. The Galactic Empire was gone. The age of dominance was over. The age of equality had begun. And it had all started because humans had the rage to say no.